It was a cold morning in the city, the kind of morning where the air feels heavy and every breath leaves a small cloud of mist. People rushed across the streets with their jackets pulled tight, their heads bent down, and their hands buried deep inside their pockets. Cars honked, buses hummed, and the sidewalks were filled with hurried footsteps, everyone trying to escape the cold. Big Shaq walked out of his building wearing a thick hoodie and gloves. He had an early meeting across town. Usually he didn't walk this way, but today something pushed him to take a different route. The sky was pale, the wind sharp, and the city felt strangely quiet despite the morning traffic. As he turned the corner, something made him slow down. Near a narrow alley, sitting on a worn-out piece of cardboard, was a homeless lady. She sat quietly, hugging her arms around her thin body, her clothes too light for the freezing weather. Her hair was messy, her skin pale, and her hands were shaking from the cold. People walked past her without looking, stepping around her as if she was just another shadow on the street. In front of her was a small cardboard sign, written in shaky letters. "Please help. Just $1 for food." Shaq felt something deep inside his chest tighten. He paused, watching her for a moment. She didn't shout for help, didn't beg loudly, didn't hold out her hands aggressively like many others did. Instead, she sat quietly with her head down, as if she didn't want to disturb anyone. Her posture was humble, almost apologetic. The city, loud and busy, seemed to ignore her completely. She looked up as a businessman walked by. Her voice was soft, almost scared. "Excuse me, sir. Could you spare $1 so I can buy some food?" Her voice shook more than her hands. But the man didn't even glance her way. He walked as if she didn't speak at all. She lowered her head again. Shaq took a slow breath and continued walking, but something in him refused to move on. His steps grew slower, heavier. He looked over his shoulder again. The lady was rubbing her hands together, trying to create warmth that wasn't there. Her shoulders trembled with every gust of wind. How long had she been sitting there? How many people had passed? How many had ignored her soft plea? Shaq wasn't a stranger to hardship. Before fame, he had lived through tough days, days when he didn't know if he could afford food or keep a roof over his head. Seeing the woman like this stirred old memories inside him, memories he did not talk about often. He took a step back, then another, until he found himself walking toward her. As he approached, she looked up with tired eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't expect anything. She simply looked at him like someone who had been disappointed too many times to hope again. Shaq noticed the small details now. Her jacket was torn at the sleeve, her shoes had holes at the bottom, and her fingers were red from the cold. She tried to straighten her back and fix her hair as he got closer, as if she didn't want to appear desperate. He stopped right in front of her. "Good morning," he said gently. She blinked, surprised that someone actually spoke to her. "Gee, good morning," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Shaq crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "Are you okay?" The question confused her. People had thrown coins at her before. People had told her to move away. People had shouted at her. But no one had asked if she was okay. She swallowed hard. "Oh, I'm just hungry," she said softly. "If I could get just $1, I can buy something warm to eat. It's been a long night." Shaq looked at the small paper cup in front of her. It had only a few coins inside. Maybe 30 cents. Not even enough for a piece of bread. The wind blew again and she hugged herself tightly. Shaq felt the cold too, but he knew her body felt it 10 times worse. She looked away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said as if asking for help was a crime. "I don't like bothering people." Shaq shook his head. "You're not bothering me." She looked at him again, and this time her eyes glistened slightly. Not from hope, but from disbelief that someone treated her like a human being. While he studied her face, he could see the exhaustion carved into every line. This wasn't a woman who chose the streets. This was someone life had pushed too far, someone who had fallen and had no one to help her back up. Shaq felt his heart getting heavier with every passing second. He could have simply pulled out $1 and walked away. That would have been enough for many people. But something inside him said this wasn't just a $1 moment. Something told him there was more to her story, a storm behind those tired eyes. People continued walking around them, some glancing briefly to see what Shaq was doing. A few slowed down, curious. Some whispered, recognizing him. But Shaq didn't care. He was focused entirely on her. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "If you can't help, it's okay. I understand." Shaq took a deep breath, feeling a decision forming inside him. A decision that would soon change her life forever. And this cold morning on the street was about to become the first warm moment she had felt in a very long time. Shaq stayed crouched in front of the homeless lady, feeling the cold bite at his skin, but something in her eyes kept him rooted to the spot. She wasn't loud, she wasn't demanding, she was simply tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than hunger or cold. It was the kind of exhaustion that came from life kicking someone over and over again. She hesitated before speaking again. I'm sorry to ask, she whispered, her voice shaking. If you can spare just $1, I promise I'll use it right. I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone. Shaq studied her face. He could see how ashamed she felt for even asking. She wasn't holding out her hand aggressively. She wasn't pushing her cardboard sign at him. Instead, she looked down at her feet, afraid of being rejected again. Afraid of being ignored like she had been ignored by 1,000 strangers. A man walking by muttered, "Just another beggar," and shook his head. She flinched at the words like they were thrown stones. Shaq's jaw tightened. He looked back at her and noticed the way she tried to hide her embarrassment under a soft, shaky smile. "You don't have to apologize," he said gently. She lifted her eyes slowly. There was something behind them, a quiet dignity that still lived beneath all the hardship. It surprised him. Even after sleeping on the street, even after being ignored and judged, she still held on to a piece of strength inside her. Shaq sat down on the cold pavement beside her, something no one had ever done. The lady gasped softly. "Sir, you don't have to sit here. You'll freeze." He shook his head. "I'm fine. I want to talk to you." She blinked, confused. People usually never wanted to talk to her. They tossed coins, avoided eye contact, or hurried away as if proximity to her hardship might infect them. "What's your name?" Shaq asked. She hesitated. It had been a long time since someone had cared. "Maya," she replied quietly. "My name is Maya." Shaq smiled. "Nice to meet you, Maya." She swallowed hard, emotions building in her chest. Nice to meet you too." Behind them, people slowed down, trying to understand what Shaq was doing sitting on the sidewalk next to a homeless woman. Some took pictures from afar. Others whispered. But Shaq didn't care. He kept his gaze on Maya. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. Maya took a deep breath. Her eyes filled with a sadness she tried to hide. "A few months now." Shaq nodded slowly, urging her to continue without pressure. "I had a job, a small one," she said, her voice trembling. "But the company closed. Then I lost my apartment. I tried to stay with friends, but everyone has their own struggles." Shaq listened quietly. No judgment. Only empathy. "I've been trying to find work again," she said, staring at her freezing hands. "But no one wants to hire someone who doesn't have a clean place to sleep or fresh clothes to wear." She let out a tiny, broken laugh. "It's funny, you need a job to get off the streets, but you need to be off the streets to get a job." Shaq felt those words hit him hard. She continued, "So now I ask for help, but only $1 at a time. Just enough to buy food. I don't want to be a burden." He could see she meant every word. She wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. She was simply trying to survive. A cold wind passed through, and Maya hugged her thin jacket tighter. Shaq immediately took off his own hoodie and wrapped it around her shoulders. She froze. "And no, I can't take that. You'll be cold." "Don't worry about me," he said softly. "Just wear it." Her lips parted in shock. Tears filled her eyes. "No one has done something like this for me and I don't even remember how long." Shaq felt his throat tighten. He didn't want to pity her, he wanted to understand her. "What do you need right now?" he asked. She hesitated, wiping her eyes with trembling fingers. "Honestly, just that $1. Enough to eat something warm. I don't ask for more." Her humility broke his heart. People around them kept watching. Some curious, some confused, some simply passing by. But for Shaq, the entire world had gone silent. There was only Maya, trembling in his hoodie, hoping for a single dollar to survive another day. Shaq reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out $1. Instead, he pulled out his wallet, filled not with just money but possibilities. Maya watched him with wide, fearful eyes, unsure of what he was about to do. Shaq looked at her gently and said, "Maya, I'm not giving you $1. Her heart sank for a moment. Then he added softly, "I'm giving you a chance to change everything." Maya stared at him, confused, breathless, and unable to speak, as her life prepared to shift in a direction she never could have imagined. Maya stared at Shaq, completely frozen, trying to understand what he meant. For a moment, her mind went blank. She had asked strangers for help hundreds of times, and the answer was always the same. A coin tossed carelessly, a cold "sorry," or no response at all. But no one had ever said something like that. No one had ever looked at her the way Shaq was looking now, not with pity but with concern, with interest, with humanity. She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. I don't understand. Shaq smiled softly, not the smile of a celebrity or a public figure, but the gentle smile of a human being who wanted to help. You asked me for $1, he said. But I think you need more than just $1. Maya looked down at her trembling hands. I don't want to take advantage, she said, her voice breaking. I don't want to ask for too much. I just need something to eat. Shaq shook his head. You're not taking advantage, he replied. You're surviving. And it's okay to need more than basic survival. A tear slipped down Maya's cheek and she quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. I don't want people to judge me, she whispered. They already do. Shaq glanced around at the people staring, filming, and whispering. He stood up slowly and turned toward the crowd. Hey, he said loudly enough for nearby people to hear. She's a human being. Not a show. Some people lowered their phones. Others looked away, suddenly ashamed. Shaq sat back down beside her again, ignoring the cold pavement beneath him. You don't owe anyone an explanation, he said gently. You don't have to apologize for needing help. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were tired, but now there was a tiny spark inside them, a spark of trust, a spark of hope. How long have you been hungry? Shaq asked softly. Maya hesitated. Her lips trembled as she finally confessed. Since yesterday morning, she said. I tried to sleep the hunger away, but it doesn't work. Not when it's this cold. Shaq's heart clenched. Hunger, cold, loneliness. She was carrying all of it alone. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. Maya's eyes widened. No, 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 she said quickly, shaking her head. That's too much. I can't take that. Shaq looked at her deeply. Why not? Because, she whispered, struggling to speak, if I take too much, people think I'm greedy, or lying, or wasting their kindness. They say homeless people shouldn't ask for more. Shaq's eyebrows furrowed. Who told you that? She looked around at all the indifferent faces. The world. Shaq felt the weight of those words. He pressed the bill gently into her hand, curling her fingers around it. You're not greedy, he said firmly. You're surviving. And this isn't charity. It's respect. Maya's lip quivered as she stared at the bill. Thank you, she whispered. But, why are you helping me like this? You don't even know me. Shaq leaned back, looking up at the cloudy sky for a moment. Because someone once helped me when I thought no one cared, he said quietly. And I never forgot it. Maya listened, surprised. She didn't know his story, didn't know his struggles. She only knew the world judged her harshly, and she assumed it judged him differently. But now she saw something familiar in his eyes, the memory of hard days, painful nights, and silent battles. Shaq looked at her again. Maya, you don't deserve to be out here. Not like this. Not alone. Her breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her. The world made her feel like she belonged on the streets, like she was invisible, like her life had no value. But what can I do? She whispered. I try to get up. I really do. But every time I try, life pushes me down again. Shaq nodded. Then someone needs to help you stand. She blinked, stunned. And, you want to help me stand? Yes, he said simply. Maya put her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry. She had held her tears back for months, tears she didn't have the luxury to shed, but now they pushed through. Shaq handed her his water bottle. Here, he said gently. Drink. Her hands shook as she unscrewed the cap. She took a small sip, then another, then held the bottle against her chest as if it were the warmest thing she owned. Shaq watched her quietly. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He let her breathe. Let her feel seen. Let her feel human again. After a long silence, Maya whispered, What happens now? Shaq smiled in a way that told her something big was coming. Now, he said, you're going to eat something warm. And after that, we're going to figure out a way to get you off the street. Maya froze, her eyes wide with shock. You're serious? She whispered. Shaq nodded. Completely. Maya clasped the $20 with both hands, tears falling freely. I don't know how to thank you. Shaq stood slowly and reached out his hand. Start by letting me help. Maya stared at his hand for a long moment, the first real hand offered to her in months. And with shaky fingers, she placed her hand in his. Her life, without knowing it yet, had just taken its first step in a brand new direction. Shaq held Maya's hand gently as he helped her stand up. Her legs were weak from sitting on the cold pavement for hours, maybe days. For a moment she stumbled, and he steadied her with a firm, reassuring grip. People nearby watched, confused or curious, but Maya kept her eyes low, nervous about being judged. "Take your time," Shaq said softly. She nodded and tried to breathe steadily. The world seemed to move slowly around her. For months she had gotten used to being ignored, stepped around, dismissed like she didn't exist. Now someone was standing beside her, actually standing with her, and it felt unreal. Shaq looked around. "Let's get you something warm to eat," he said. Maya hesitated, hugging his hoodie closer around her shoulders. I don't want to trouble you," she whispered. "You're not," Shaq replied. "Come on." They walked toward a small cafe at the end of the street. Maya's steps were small and slow, and every few seconds she looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to yell at her for entering a place she didn't belong. When they reached the cafe door, she froze. "I can't go in," she whispered, shaking her head. "They'll throw me out." Shaq smiled gently. "Not when you're with me." Still she shook harder. "People stare. They don't want someone like me inside." He opened the door and stepped halfway in, holding it open. "Look at me," he said. "You're human. You deserve warmth. One meal won't break the world." Maya swallowed hard, then took a trembling step forward. As she entered, some customers did stare, not with disgust but with surprise, especially when they recognized Shaq walking beside her. She kept her head down, trying not to draw attention. "Sit here," Shaq said, pointing to a table near the back. She sat slowly, her hands shaking as she placed them on her lap. The waitress approached and greeted Shaq excitedly, then looked at Maya with a softer, unsure expression. Shaq noticed and gently said, "She's with me. Bring her anything warm, something good." The waitress nodded quickly, her expression changing to kindness. Maya's eyes watered. She whispered, "I haven't sat inside a restaurant in. I don't even remember." Shaq leaned back. "Well, that changes today." In a few minutes the food arrived, hot soup, bread, tea. The steam rose from the bowl, warming Maya's face. She stared at it as if it was a dream she couldn't touch. Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon. "Go on," Shaq encouraged. She took a small sip, then another, and then she couldn't stop. Tears ran down her cheeks silently as she ate, each bite filling her with warmth that went beyond her stomach. Shaq pretended not to notice her tears out of respect, but inside his chest he felt a deep ache. How long had she been suffering like this? After she finished the soup, she took a long sip of tea and exhaled for the first time since they sat down. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "I needed this more than I knew." Shaq nodded. "Food first. Now you can breathe." Maya looked around the cafe. People weren't staring anymore. Some smiled at her gently. The world looked softer, even if just for a moment. She placed her hands around the warm cup. "I used to have a life," she said quietly. "A little apartment, a job, friends. I wasn't always like this." "I know," Shaq replied gently. "I lost everything so fast," she continued. "One bad moment, one piece of bad luck, and suddenly I was on the street. I thought I would get back up quickly, but life doesn't work like that." Shaq listened silently, letting her speak. Maya wiped her eyes. "I didn't become homeless because I was lazy or because I wanted to. I just ran out of people who cared." Shaq's heart tightened. "You have someone who cares now." She looked at him, confused. "What? Why would you care about me?" Shaq smiled softly. "Because everyone deserves a chance. Because you didn't give up. And because asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave." Maya blinked slowly. For the first time in months she felt seen. Truly seen. Shaq leaned forward. "Listen, Maya. $1 won't fix your life. Food won't fix your life. But someone believing in you, that might." Her eyes filled again. "I want to get back up," she whispered. "I really do." "And you will," Shaq replied. She took a deep breath. What happens next?" Shaq looked at her with a seriousness she wasn't expecting. "Next," he said, "we get you off the street." Her heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Shaq took his phone out of his pocket and held it up. "I'm calling someone who can help you, not just today but long term." Maya stared at him as if the world had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. Are you really going to help me?" she whispered. Shaq smiled warmly. "I already am." And in that moment, the cold morning outside felt a little less cold. Because for the first time in a long time, Maya felt the warmth of hope returning. Shaq stepped outside the cafe with Maya walking slowly beside him, wrapped tightly in his hoodie. The cold air hit her again, But this time it didn't feel as sharp because something inside her had warmed. Hope. She hadn't felt that in months. She walked with careful steps, worrying that the moment might disappear if she blinked too long. Shaq pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Maya watched nervously, wondering what kind of call he was about to make. She kept her arms crossed tightly, not to protect against the cold, but because she didn't know how to accept kindness this big. Shaq pressed a number and lifted the phone to his ear. "Yo," he said calmly, "I need your help with something important." Maya looked at the ground. She didn't want to be a problem for anyone. She didn't want people talking about her behind her back. But she also didn't want to stop the one good thing happening in her life. "Yes," Shaq said, nodding seriously, "today. Right now. I'm with someone who needs a place to stay. Yeah. A safe place. Somewhere warm." Maya's heart sped up. A place to stay? She held her breath, afraid to believe it. After a minute, Shaq ended the call and turned to her. "All right," he said, "let's walk." Where are we going?" she asked softly. "I have a friend who runs a shelter," he explained. "Not a crowded, unsafe one, a good one. With warm beds, showers, meals, and support programs." Maya froze. But I don't have money to pay." Shaq shook his head gently. "You don't need money. You just need a chance." Her eyes filled with tears again. She tried to wipe them quickly, embarrassed. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," Shaq replied. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Even me." They walked down the street together, but as they moved forward, people began noticing Shaq. Some pointed. Some whispered. Some took out their phones. Maya tensed immediately, pulling the hoodie over her face. Shaq noticed and slowed down. "Don't worry," he said. "Let them talk. You didn't do anything wrong." But Maya's hands shook. "People look at me like I'm dirt," she said quietly. "Like I'm not supposed to walk beside someone like you." Shaq stopped walking and turned to face her completely. "Listen," he said, his voice firm but warm. "You are not dirt. You're a human being. You deserve to be treated like one." She stared at him, and for the first time in months she didn't lower her eyes. They reached a busy intersection. Cars rushed past, horns blaring. The world looked loud and uncaring, but Shaq made her feel like she belonged somewhere again. While waiting for the light to change, a group of teenagers recognized Shaq and ran over. "Big Shaq! Big Shaq!" one of them shouted. "Can we take a picture?" Shaq smiled politely. "Yeah, sure," he said. But before he posed, he looked at Maya. "Is it okay?" he asked quietly, making sure she didn't feel pushed aside. Maya nodded slowly. The teens snapped their photos, laughing and cheering. But then one of them glanced at Maya and whispered to his friend, "Why is he with her?" Maya flinched. Shaq heard it. He turned sharply toward the teen. "She has a name," he said in a calm but powerful voice. "And you treat people with respect. Understand?" The teen swallowed hard and nodded. "Sorry." Shaq smiled at him gently. "Good. Now go." When they continued walking, Maya let out a shaky breath. "You didn't have to defend me," she whispered. "Yes," Shaq said, "I did." They finally reached a quieter street where a van was parked. A man stepped out, smiling warmly. He looked like someone you could trust. Soft eyes, calm voice, gentle posture. "You must be Maya," he said kindly. "I'm Joel. Shaq called me." Maya tightened her grip on the hoodie. Hello." Joel extended his hand but didn't force her to take it. "We have a room ready for you," he said. "A warm one. You can stay as long as you need. No pressure." Maya's breath trembled. She looked at Shaq, unsure. "Is this real?" she whispered. Shaq nodded. "Very real." Joel opened the van door. Inside were blankets, a small heater, and a thermos of hot tea. Maya hesitated, afraid to step inside. Afraid this moment would turn into disappointment like everything else. Shaq placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "This is your chance," he said gently. "Take it." Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Her voice broke. "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "But you're not alone." She took one small step. Then another. Finally, she climbed inside, clutching the hoodie like a lifeline. Joel closed the door carefully. Shaq leaned in through the window. "I'll check on you later," he promised. Maya looked at him, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for today, but for treating me like a person again." Shaq smiled softly. "You always were one." As the van pulled away, Maya watched him grow smaller in the distance. The man who had stopped for a single dollar, and instead offered her a new life. The van ride felt unreal to Maya. She sat in the back seat wrapped in a thick blanket Joel had placed around her shoulders. The heater hummed softly, warming her numb fingers and toes. Maya kept staring out of the window as the city passed by, the tall buildings, the crowded sidewalks, the cold air outside. For months she saw the world from the pavement, from corners, from shadows. Now she was seeing it from a warm seat, moving forward instead of being stuck. Joel drove calmly, glancing back every once in a while. "You okay back there?" he asked. Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you," she whispered, though her voice still shook. "You're safe now," Joel said gently. "Just relax. We're almost there." But Maya didn't know how to relax. She kept gripping the blanket tightly, her breath uneven. She was afraid this was temporary, afraid that kindness could vanish just as quickly as it appeared. Afraid she would wake up on the street again tomorrow morning. She looked down at the hoodie she still wore, Shaq's hoodie. It smelled faintly of detergent and warmth, and she held onto it like a piece of hope. She had been ignored for so long that she still struggled to believe someone could care enough to do all this. After 20 quiet minutes, the van slowed and turned into a small neighborhood. It wasn't fancy or rich, but it looked peaceful. Clean sidewalks, small houses, lit windows, and cars parked neatly along the street. It felt safe. They stopped in front of a 2-story building with a sign that read, "New Path Shelter. A fresh start begins with one step." The words alone almost made Maya cry. Joel opened the van door and offered his hand. "Welcome home," he said softly. Maya stepped out, her knees shaking. She stared at the building as if it were a dream drawn from her imagination. For a long moment she simply stood there, unable to move. Inside her mind, fears clashed with hope. What if they don't want me here? What if I don't belong? What if this goes wrong like everything else? Joel noticed her hesitation. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, everyone in there knows how it feels to struggle," he said gently. "No one will judge you. You're not alone anymore." She swallowed hard. With trembling steps, she followed Joel up to the door. The moment they entered, warm air wrapped around her like a hug. The hallway smelled of clean laundry, fresh soup, and something she hadn't smelled in months, home. A woman with kind eyes walked over immediately. "You must be Maya," she said softly. "Shaq and Joel told us about you. Come dear. We have a room ready." Maya nodded shyly, unable to speak. The woman led her down the hallway to a small room with soft lighting, a neatly made bed, a desk, a chair, and a folded towel on top of the blanket. There were shelves with clothes, a tiny heater, and even a small potted plant on the windowsill. "This is yours," the woman said with a smile. "Take your time. Rest. Shower. We're here to help you with everything." Maya stepped inside and touched the bed gently. It felt soft beneath her hand, so soft she almost doubted it was real. Her throat tightened. "I don't deserve all this," she whispered. The woman stepped closer. "Everyone deserves warmth," she said gently. "Everyone deserves safety. Everyone deserves a chance." A tear slipped down Maya's cheek. She nodded quietly. "Join us in the dining room when you're ready," the woman added. "There's fresh soup, bread, tea, and people who will be happy to meet you." Maya nodded again. When the woman left, Maya closed the door and leaned against it, her legs weak. She slid to the floor and covered her face, crying silently. Not from sadness, but from the shock of being treated with kindness after months of cold stares and harsh words. For a long time she just sat there, letting every emotion she had buried finally rise to the surface. Eventually she stood up and walked into the bathroom. When she turned on the shower, hot water steamed up the room instantly. She stepped in and felt the warmth melt the dirt, fear, and exhaustion from her skin. She cried again, but the water hid her tears this time. Later, wrapped in clean clothes the shelter provided, Maya walked slowly into the dining room. People were talking softly, eating dinner, smiling at each other. When they saw her, they smiled too, not with pity but with genuine welcome. A young woman waved her over. "Come sit with us," she said warmly. Maya hesitated, then slowly took a seat. They asked her name. They shared their own stories. Some were once homeless too. Some were volunteers. Some were rebuilding their lives step by step. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt her heart loosen. Halfway through the meal, the door opened and Shaq walked in. Maya froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Shaq saw her and smiled. "Hey," he said softly. "You look better already." Maya stood up, tears forming again. You came." "I said I'd check on you," Shaq replied. "I keep my promises." Maya walked up to him slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. You didn't just help me, you saved me." Shaq shook his head gently. No, Maya. You saved yourself. I just helped you take the first step. She wiped her eyes. I won't waste this chance, she said, her voice trembling with determination. Shaq smiled. I know you won't. For the first time in months, maybe years, Maya felt something powerful growing inside her. A beginning. The next morning, Maya woke up before the sun rose. For a moment she forgot where she was. She opened her eyes expecting to see cold concrete, a dark alley, or the sky above her. But instead, she saw a warm blanket, soft pillows, and sunlight gently touching the curtains of a real window. She blinked several times, breathing slowly, letting the safety of the room sink into her bones. She sat up and held the blanket close. Her body still expected danger. Her mind still expected someone to yell at her to move. It took a long moment for her to realize something she had not felt in months. She was safe. A quiet knock came at the door. Maya? Breakfast is ready whenever you are, a soft voice called. I'll be there, she answered, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. When she walked into the dining room, a few people waved at her. The same woman from last night brought her a warm plate of eggs and toast. Eat slowly, she said kindly. Your body needs time. Maya nodded and sat. As she took her first bite, her hands shook again. Not from cold, but from gratitude. After breakfast, Joel came over with a warm smile. How did you sleep? Maya looked down, overwhelmed. I slept, she said simply. Really slept. No fear. No cold. Just rest. That's what we want for you, Joel replied. Later that morning, Maya had her first meeting with the shelter's counselor. She talked about her life, not everything but enough. About losing her job. About friends disappearing. About crying alone under bridges. The counselor listened without judgment, nodding gently, letting Maya speak at her own pace. For the first time in months, her voice didn't feel small. It didn't feel like it was being swallowed by the world. Meanwhile, Shaq returned to the shelter that afternoon just like he promised. When Maya saw him, her eyes lit up with genuine happiness, something she hadn't felt in a long time. He handed her a small bag. I brought something for you. Maya opened it carefully. Inside were new shoes, socks, and a warm coat. Her breath caught. Shaq. I can't accept all this. Yes, you can, he said softly. And you will. Her eyes filled with tears again. Why are you being so kind to me? Shaq sat beside her. Because someone helped me once. When I had nothing, someone believed in me. Now I'm passing it forward. She looked at him deeply, trying to understand the weight of his words. Were you ever like me? She whispered. Shaq nodded. I had bad days too. Days when I didn't know if I'd make it. Someone saved me. Now I'm saving you. Maya covered her mouth and cried quietly. Not from sadness but from being understood. Later, Shaq walked with her around the shelter. He showed her the small garden out back where residents grew vegetables. He introduced her to volunteers who help people write resumes, learn skills, and apply for jobs. Maya listened with wide, hopeful eyes. You can start over here, Shaq said. Life isn't finished for you. Maya touched the sleeve of her new coat. I want to try, she said softly. I want to be myself again. You will be, Shaq replied with certainty. In the evening, as the shelter dimmed its lights and people settled into their rooms, Maya sat by the small window in her room. She watched children laughing outside, volunteers talking gently, and Shaq giving instructions to Joel before leaving. She pressed her forehead against the glass. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel useless. She didn't feel like a burden. She felt human. She felt seen. Before bed, the counselor gave her a small notebook. Write your thoughts, she suggested. Write what hurts, what heals, what dreams you still have. Maya held the notebook to her chest like a treasure. She whispered to herself, dreams? I can have dreams again. As she lay in bed, wrapped in warmth instead of cold concrete, a new thought entered her mind, one she had not dared to think in months. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe I can rebuild. Maybe I can live again. She closed her eyes with a soft smile. That night, Maya didn't dream of fear. She dreamed of possibility. Maya woke up the next morning with a feeling that surprised her. She felt lighter. For months, every morning had begun with dread, hunger, and fear of surviving one more day on the streets. But now, as she opened her eyes, she felt something warm spreading through her chest. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't safety. It was something deeper. It was hope. She stretched her arms slowly as if learning how to use them again and looked around her room. The bed was still soft. The heater still hummed. The plant on the windowsill was still alive. Nothing had disappeared overnight. She was still safe. She placed her hand on the new coat folded at the edge of her bed. It felt soft beneath her fingertips. She pressed it gently, remembering that someone cared enough to give it to her. Someone believed she deserved warmth. That thought alone made her eyes fill with emotion again. After getting dressed, she walked into the dining room. People she barely knew greeted her like an old friend. "Morning, Maya. How did you sleep? You look brighter today." Maya tried to smile, though her voice cracked. "Thank you. I'm trying." Joel waved from across the room and approached with a clipboard. "Big day today," he said brightly. "You ready?" "For what?" Maya asked nervously. "For your first step," Joel said. "Shaq arranged something." Maya's breath caught. "Shaq did something else?" Joel chuckled. "Shaq always does something else." Before Maya could ask further, the door opened, and Shaq walked in, carrying 2 bags and smiling like someone who had been waiting all morning to see her reaction. Maya stood still, unsure how to react. "You're back?" "I told you," Shaq said. "I'm not done helping." He set the bags down and opened one of them. Inside were personal care products, clothes, and a phone. Maya covered her mouth with her hands. "This is for me?" "All of it," Shaq said. "You need these things if you're going to start rebuilding." Maya shook her head, overwhelmed. "Shaq, this is too much." "No," he said gently, "this is the right amount." He took out the phone, brand new, simple, not flashy. "This is so you can call the shelter, the job center, and me. You're not going to be alone anymore." Maya's knees weakened and she sank slowly into a chair. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know how to accept this much kindness." Shaq sat in the chair across from her. "Accept it because you deserve it." Maya closed her eyes tightly. She felt something inside her shift, something that had been locked away for so long. Self-worth. After breakfast, Joel and Shaq walked with her to a small office in the shelter. A volunteer named Linda, soft-spoken and kind, greeted her. "We're going to help you with job applications today," Linda said. "No pressure, just small steps." Maya nodded nervously. "I haven't used a computer in a long time." "That's okay," Linda smiled. "I'll guide you." They spent hours together. Maya learned how to log in, how to search for jobs, how to rewrite her resume. She had more experience than she remembered: receptionist work, food service, cleaning, childcare. As Linda typed, Maya watched in shock. "I didn't realize I had done so much," Maya whispered. "You've survived more than most," Linda said. "That counts too." In the afternoon, Shaq checked in again. "How's it going?" Linda grinned. "She's a fast learner." Maya blushed. "I'm trying." Shaq nodded proudly. "You're doing more than trying. You're growing." Later, Shaq surprised her again. "We're going out," he said. Maya froze. "Out? Where?" "For something important." She followed him nervously into the city. They walked into a small salon, the kind with warm lighting and soft music. Maya stopped at the door, panicking. I can't go inside," she whispered. "I look beautiful," Shaq interrupted. Maya stared at him in disbelief. "I look broken." "You look strong," Shaq said softly. "Let them help you feel that way." Inside, the stylist welcomed her kindly. They washed her hair, brushed it gently, trimmed the ends, and shaped it beautifully. They gave her clean nails and let her choose a simple hairstyle. When she looked in the mirror afterward, she gasped. She didn't look like the woman who lived under bridges. She didn't look like the woman people ignored on the sidewalk. She didn't look like someone who had lost everything. She looked like someone starting over. Her eyes filled again. "Shaq, I don't know who I'm looking at." "You're looking at Maya," he said. "The real one." They walked back to the shelter together. Maya kept touching her hair, her new coat, the warm feeling inside her chest. She was changing, not because of the things she received, but because someone believed she deserved a second chance. As they approached the shelter, Shaq looked at her seriously. "Tomorrow we start looking at job interviews." Maya's heart raced. Do you think I can work again?" Shaq smiled with full confidence. I know you can." That night, as Maya rested in her warm bed, she whispered to herself, "I can do this. I can live again." And for the first time in a long, painful journey, she truly believed it. The next week began with something Maya had almost forgotten how to feel: nervous excitement. She woke up before sunrise again, but this time it wasn't because of fear or cold. It was because she had her first job interview. When she stood in front of the mirror, wearing the clean clothes Shaq had given her and her new coat, she hardly recognized the reflection. Her hair was neatly styled, her eyes brighter, her face calmer. She looked like someone who belonged in a workplace, not on a street corner. Joel knocked lightly on her door. "Ready?" he asked. Maya took a shaky breath. "I hope so." "You're more ready than you think," Joel said with a smile. Shaq arrived at the shelter entrance just as they stepped outside. "Morning, Maya," he said warmly. Maya smiled nervously. "Morning. You look confident," he said. "That's the first step." They drove together to the small business district. Maya's hands shook the whole ride. "What if they don't choose me?" she whispered. "What if I mess up?" Shaq looked at her gently. "Then we try again. And again. And again. Success isn't one moment, it's many tries." When they reached the building, Shaq squeezed her shoulder. "You've survived the hardest parts of life already. An interview is nothing compared to that." Maya nodded slowly. She stepped inside alone, her heart pounding. The interview room was warm, bright, and filled with kind people. For the first time, Maya felt like someone was actually listening to her. She talked about her past jobs, her skills, her dreams. She didn't talk about the streets, not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to focus on her future. When the interview ended, the supervisor smiled. "Thank you, Maya. We'll call you soon." She walked outside, her legs trembling. Shaq and Joel were waiting. "How'd it go?" Shaq asked. I think it went okay," she said, unsure. Shaq grinned. "See? I told you." They returned to the shelter, but Maya couldn't relax. She paced her room, her thoughts spinning. She didn't want to go back to the streets. She didn't want to lose this chance. Then late in the afternoon, Joel knocked on her door holding his phone. "Maya," he said, "someone wants to speak with you." Her heart raced as she answered the call with shaky hands. "Hello? Maya?" It was the supervisor's voice. "Yes, this is me," Maya whispered. "We'd like you to start working with us," the supervisor said warmly. "Can you begin on Monday?" Maya dropped to her knees, tears falling fast. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I can." Joel helped her sit on the bed, his eyes bright with pride. "You did it," he said softly. "No," Maya said through tears. "We did it." When Shaq arrived in the evening, Maya ran to him. "Shaq, I got the job." He froze for a second, then broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "I knew you would," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You earned this." That night, the shelter held a small celebration for her. People clapped, hugged her, and told her how proud they were. Maya had never felt so loved, so supported, so alive. The next days were full of preparation. Learning bus routes, practicing waking up early, picking out work clothes, preparing lunches. Every night she wrote in her notebook, filling page after page with thoughts she had once been too scared to speak. On Monday morning, Maya left the shelter before sunrise. The air was cold, but she didn't shiver the way she used to. Her coat was warm. Her heart was warmer. When she reached the workplace, she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The staff welcomed her kindly. They showed her around, taught her the tasks, and treated her with respect. She worked carefully, doing everything with dedication. At lunch, she sat with coworkers who asked about her hobbies, not her past. She smiled more that day than she had in an entire year. At the end of her first shift, she walked outside, and there he was. Shaq leaned against his car, arms crossed, smiling wide. "I knew you'd make it," he said. Maya laughed softly. "I felt like a real person today," she whispered. "You are," Shaq said gently. "You always were." Maya stepped closer, tears in her eyes. "Shaq, thank you. You didn't just give me help. You gave me back my life. You gave me a future." Shaq shook his head. "I just opened the door. You walked through it." Maya looked up at the sky, remembering the cold pavement, the hunger, the loneliness, everything she thought would kill her spirit. But it didn't. Because a stranger stopped for a single dollar, and changed everything. From that day on, Maya worked hard. She saved money. She joined classes at the shelter. She became stronger, happier, and more confident. Within months, she moved into a small apartment of her own, decorated with the potted plant from her shelter room. And whenever she walked past someone homeless on the street, she didn't look away. She knelt. She listened. She helped. Because she knew exactly what a single moment of kindness could do. Her life didn't just change, it restarted. And it all began with one soft question on a cold morning. "Can you spare $1?"